All right. So first things first.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm happy to be here.
That's very good to hear. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Now, before we get into the album Peacemaker, I'd like to jump back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, I read somewhere that you started piano at a young age, but
Yeah.
you kind of delved into people like Franz Liszt, Rachmaninoff, like the most ridiculously difficult type of piano music you can find. How come?
Oh, it was just always I think, even as a child, I had this drive towards exceptionalism, but also just complicated music, complicated literature. And specifically with regard to piano, I just always wanted to be able to play the most difficult things. And that was the one that was the final kicker, was when I went to my piano teacher and asked to learn how to play Transcendental Etude number 11. And without knowing how to read music, really, without knowing any technical, I was like, hey, like this, I would like to learn how to play this. And luckily she was like, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out some way. I'd had many teachers before who had just been like, are you kidding me? We're starting with Suzuki 1. Like, you get this, you're gonna learn how to play these scales. But she worked with me, and I actually got to a point where I could do the crossovers, and it wasn't incredible, but it was enough for me that it kept that sort of fire for learning going. And I still listen to that stuff all the time.
But I think it's amazing, and like you say, I enjoy the virtuosity of it,
Yes.
the kind of extremeness almost of it. And
Yeah.
you mentioned being attracted to that in literature and in other facets of art. How come, you think?
Oh, it's just baked into my personality. I think you're right. Extremism is the word. It's not even exceptionalism. It's extremism. It's just baked into me. I've always been a very intense person.
Do you like the struggle?
I love the struggle. I love the struggle. I think I am burnished by the struggle. I'm one who, I like to work hard, and I like to try to do impossible things. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So when did you kind of marry that side of your life with kind of songwriting and putting thoughts onto paper?
Well, the thoughts onto paper came first.
Okay.
I was always a writer, even from the time I was a child. If you asked me as a really small little girl what I was going to be when I grew up, I would say I'm a writer.
Okay.
I am a writer. I will not be a writer. I am right now a writer at 3. Like, that's what I would say.
What did you write?
I don't even know. I don't even know if I actually was writing anything. I think it was just an identity that I held. And, we always learned in my family that writers were kind of like the ultimate creators. And if you wanted to, play in something, act in something, make something, you had to write it and make the world for yourself, as opposed to going outwards and finding other people to do it for you. So I definitely started writing stories and poetry very, very early on. I was a big reader as a kid. But music was a different world for me, and it felt impossible. Maybe because I was playing Liszt and Rachmaninoff, so it felt like, no, you cannot just strum a chord on a guitar. You have to do this incredibly complex work. And so I definitely limited myself in that way for a long time. And it wasn't until right before I made my first record, Shades, that I even conceptualized that it would be possible for me to make music and me to make my own music.
What changed?
I changed. Something was lifted from me, a major wall that I'd built, a block. And suddenly I was able to do it. Whereas before I was totally incapable of it. I mean, if you had asked me to sing in 2016, I would have opened my mouth and it would have been like a frog, like nothing would have come out. Yeah.
But you did sing privately, right?
Yes and no. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I didn't know my own voice.
Okay.
I didn't know the power of my voice. I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was that transition like then, once that wall was lifted in a way, where you do get to explore your voice and get to explore that side of your creativity and actually Well, I don't know if the sharing point was immediate, but at some point you're also going to share what you've made. So how was that transition from not at all doing it to?
It was pretty wild. It was unexpected, and it was a dramatic shift. I mean, it came after a plant medicine ceremony. I went in and sat with this plant, and came out of it desperate and needing to make a record. Okay. Or not even, I didn't even know it was a record at that point. I needed to make some music and record it. I didn't know what I was going to make, but I went into a studio and with a couple of songs, and I thought I'd maybe do something simple, but as we know, I can't do anything simple. And so it ballooned into this massive undertaking, and it became clear in that process that I had to share it, that it wasn't only something for me. Initially, I'd gone into it being, oh, this is just going to be for me to express myself. But it was so far beyond me that it was something I needed to share. And it was kind of terrifying. I mean, the first time that my voice came out of me, it was surprising. It wasn't the voice that I knew that I had. It was nothing that I'd ever heard before. So, yeah, it was overwhelming.
Kind of the result was the album Shades, I suppose. And if you listen to those songs now, because it's been 5 years, do you hear the person you were then? What do you hear when you think about those songs, when you listen to those songs?
It's a good question. I mean, I certainly think about things that I would do differently now. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I hear a bit of bewilderment. You know, I'm bewildered by what's happening, and certainly still a little bit guarded against it, both in the sense of guarded against what was happening in me and guarded against how it would be received by others. There's a dramatic difference, I think, in my voice, in the expression of my voice between the two records. And there's a lot of growth that comes out of kind of sinking into it. I really think.
But I also think that there is a foundation that you found, kind of obviously you grow as a person and as a musician, but there seems to be some foundation that you kind of gravitated towards. Maybe it's difficult to explain, but how would you explain kind of your musical foundation?
Oof, my musical foundation. I think the foundation that you are feeling and seeing in there is really just the my coming to understand myself and a foundation in myself and my identity as a person and as an artist. And that's ultimately where I make all of my music from, is this grounding in who I am. You know, it comes out of everything that I'm interested in. It comes out of all of my literary background and my musical background and what I watch on TV. Sure. I mean, like, whatever. It's this synthesis of everything that I love. And I think that I'm such a strong personality. I think that comes through no matter what. Yeah.
Well, one last question about kind of the inspiration and kind of the background is, I read somewhere that Skip James was a heavy influence. Oh, yeah. How did kind of the Delta blues mold you? Oh
my God! I mean, well, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you just mentioned his name, and I get full body chills. I grew up like in the world listening to blues music from my family, but it wasn't the Delta blues and it wasn't pre-war blues. It was more later stuff. And I will never forget the first time that I heard Skip James and just how much could come through something so sparse and how much he was able to evoke with his voice. And the simplicity of his lyrics that belied so much complexity, and it changed everything for me. And I went really, really deep into that stuff.
One thing I find interesting then is with Shades, one of the kind of words that was surrounding that album was haunting, and a lot of that blues music, if you listen to Sunghouse and Skip James, it's so haunting, and there's this, eerie nature to it. Is that what you enjoy to put in your own music as well? Kind of that eerie.
That's what I enjoy myself. I don't think I have a choice. I think it just comes through with me. There's this sense with those great blues, especially the early blues musicians, is this just raw emotion and this unbridled emotion. They're really laying it all out there. And I think that's what's haunting, is someone like tapping into that measure of pain and looking at them, like looking at themselves in that way that that I can relate to.
As a songwriter then, doing that to yourself, I mean, that can be quite confronting, I imagine.
Yeah. I'm not afraid of confronting myself.
Oh, that's very good.
Maybe confrontation with others, not so great at. Something I'm working on. But when it comes to confronting myself, my emotions, my trauma, my struggles, no problem. I am a Scorpio through and through. That's what I'm born for, is to just dive right in and go to the heart of my pain and try and transmute it.
I find that interesting because in that sense, Shades was very much a solitary album in a way. You did everything yourself, and now this time around you were looking at outwards. You were looking at people to work with, and it was much more communal. So sharing that confrontation in a way, did that cause any hesitation or?
Certainly initially, I definitely had some reservations about whether I would be able to get out of others what I knew that I could get out of myself, but it went far beyond anything that I could have hoped for. I mean, the musicians I worked with on that record took what I had written, you know, I would play them parts and then they would twist them around and bring these elements to them that I could have never fathomed, and that really expanded my world beyond anything that I could have hoped for. Really freaking awesome. Yeah.
What was the first song that you started kind of fleshing out then?
For this record?
Yeah.
Well, fleshing out, the first, I think, if I remember correctly, the first one that we recorded in this batch was actually Instrument of War, which was the last song on the record, which if I were able to go back in time, I probably would have done differently. I would have saved that one for further on, because that's the most challenging song on the record, honestly, and was the most challenging song to record.
In what way? Musically, lyrically?
Both, everything. And it means so much to me, that song. But so we recorded that one first, and then, the good thing about that is that sort of set the sonic template for the rest of the record. And it always was going to be the focal point of the record, even though it's at the end. To me, it's the thematic core. And then I can't remember what came next. I mean, that whole process was just such a whirlwind.
I wrote random lines down from some of the songs.
Great.
So maybe we can delve into them.
Yeah, go for it.
For Instrument of War, let's see what I wrote down. He's gonna see a woman that is built for war.
Yeah.
I like that phrase. Where did that come from?
I don't know, somewhere inside me. Yeah.
do you? Well, that's an interesting thing, because do you reflect a lot on what you write, or is it kind of a stream of consciousness as well?
It's both. It depends. I mean, some lines come ready-made. It's like they drop from the sky. And some I work on. But I feel like that song really wrote itself, honestly. Yeah. I mean, I have somewhere, definitely in my phone and in a notebook somewhere, I have like the early incarnations of it. But the best lines in that song were just born and given, and unaltered.
Just a kind of quick in between, because you did study literature at Harvard. I don't know what kind of literature. I read Russian literature as well, but English as well? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that make lyric writing easier or harder?
Easy for me, yeah. I enjoy words, and I enjoy writing them, and I enjoy working with them and crafting them. Lyrics have never been my problem. It's everything else.
I can imagine if you have a huge vocabulary and all these poems and poetic ideas, it must be difficult to kind of make a 3-minute song.
Yes, and I don't really make 3-minute songs.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. But you say Instrument of War is kind of kind of a key track on the album.
Yeah.
And if we think about Peacemaker, the overall theme, which is I read based on the Colt Single Action Army Rifle, which was kind of post Civil War or during.
Yeah, that's sort of like at the foundation of like the pushing west. Yeah.
But how did kind of that, the weapon become a source of inspiration?
It wasn't really that the weapon was the source of inspiration so much as the weapon came to, in thinking, like in retrospect, long after the record had been made, to me came to be a good symbol for the record itself. Instrument of War was supposed to be the title of the record, but never fit. It was like, I tried it on and it really wasn't quite it. And then the word Peacemaker sort of landed out of nowhere, and it, to me, encapsulated so much of the complexity of the record. It is the original American instrument of war, so that worked. And it also is this beautiful word and this beautiful concept, the peacemaker, that then wraps around something absolutely horrible. And what can I do as an artist, or what do I do as an artist to take the horrible things that have happened to me, the horrible things that are done in the world, the horrible things that my ancestors may have done, and transmute them and turn them into something positive? How can we reclaim the word peacemaker and make it about making peace again? And then also, it seemed to me to stand for who I've become in the process of both my personal, emotional, and spiritual development. And as a musician, like in many ways, I made this record 4 years ago and was in a completely different place in my life. And since then have become a peacemaker in my life, making peace with myself and my painful emotions, and making peace with those who've hurt me and these events in the world which I can't possibly comprehend. How can I make peace with them to move forward in my life?
Well, that's the question, right? Because that's the difficulty of it. I mean, we all have these troubles, and we all try to figure it out.
Yeah.
But how do you make peace with it? And is it through music for you? Music is one aspect, obviously. You have other artistic expressions, but is music one of those vehicles through which you can find peace?
Absolutely, especially in the sense of as a way to express the inexpressible, right? Like expressing emotions that as a woman or as a person in society, we're not allowed to express. We're told that we can't express our anger. You don't want to show that you're angry. You don't want to show that you're upset. You just want to, you're good. Yeah, you're good. You're not allowed to express these things, right? So how can I do that and therefore move past them? Because we can't move through our feelings unless we feel them. Then they get stuck inside of us and they make us sick. They've done that to me. Sure. If you hold stuff inside, you're just going to break. So that's really what's done.
Which song allowed you to purge?
The most?
Yeah.
Oh, so many of them.
Because there are some, I mean, a bad idea, I suppose, is kind of about the California wildfires or nature.
Yeah, it's about a lot of stuff, yeah. I think the one that's the most powerful for me, there's all of them.
All of them,
but
obviously, yes.
Blood Bond is the one that really allows me to tap into stuff in a way where I can really sing that out, you know, that one. And then Desire Path is another one where I was really able to work through some things in the writing of it and in the performing of it. But Blood Bond is the one that, that's for the angry teenager inside of me. And that's so that she can really get it all out.
I had a question. It's not a good question.
Oh, that's fine.
But you mentioned awful love songs. I wanted to ask you, what makes an awful love song in your mind?
Oh, God, I don't even know.
I know it's not a good question. So
no, I'd have to think about, what was I thinking about for that? I don't remember what the
horror songs.
The horror songs is the Misfits songs that I used to. Sure. I made the most of another man's horror songs, because I recorded that Misfits that Misfits EP that I made at like, I think I actually went in to start recording it at like, after this unimaginable, insane, horrible, crazy thing had happened to me.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, what am I supposed to do? And I had this time booked in the studio, and I was like, I don't know, I guess I'll go in and sing these songs. So those are the horror songs. I don't even remember what the love songs were, though. Awful love songs.
Never mind.
I mean, I guess, I don't know. It's so hard to say. There aren't so many awful songs. I appreciate songs.
One thing that I kind of got from the album is kind of the lying and truthfulness and kind of the games we play around those.
Sure.
How did that filter into the music? What was that, because you say this record was mostly written or created 4 years ago? Was that kind of something that was...
Definitely. There's always been, I mean, music for me has always been a way of getting at the truth. My first record was so much about expressing, I mean, all the time, but especially with Shades, it was about expressing my truth and like what, you know, being honest with myself. And I think once you start being honest with yourself, you can then engage with others in a way where like I was finally able to see where other people weren't being honest with me. Because I'd been lying to myself for years about who I was and what I could do and what I was capable of. And then now I'm being truthful with myself, and I'm starting to see, you know, lies everywhere. I don't know. But that's certainly, I honestly hadn't even thought about what a big theme that was on the record until you just brought this up.
But one thing which you just said reminded me, I had that everybody lies. I mean, that was something that kind of I figured out somewhere in my 20s.
Yeah.
And it made me very cynical. I don't know, how did it affect you, kind of, as you mentioned, the realizing, and we talked earlier about making peace with things and kind of finding peace in things. So how do you kind of, I still struggle with that, how I can't make peace all the time with how people are inherently. So it's a difficult, tricky thing. How do you navigate that?
I don't know. You know, the thing that I think about is I have a friend in New York. His name's Michael Levitin, and he's written a book, a memoir called To Be Honest, and he was raised in a family where they taught him to never lie about anything at all.
Radical honesty.
Radical honesty. And he writes this memoir about how it really, like, for a while made it really hard for him to function in the world because we're all kind of lying all the time. I don't know what that has to do with this. I just thought of that and give a little tip to him.
I'm gonna look that up. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, he's a fascinating, really cool person. So how do I come to terms with that in the world? I don't know. You know, I think you find a balance in things. You can't expect everyone to be honest all the time.
Right.
But I guess finding that radical honesty with myself is really important. Being honest with myself, that's all I can ask for. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I can only ever ask, you can ultimately really only ask anything of yourself. And that's what I feel.
In that sense, I don't know if this is the right word to use, but was this whole process empowering for you, or was Shades already that?
Shades was wildly empowering for me, but this was a completely different level because that was just the beginning. This one, if that one was sort of opening the door to my power, this was really being in the center of it, sitting in it, especially when it came to my voice, learning the real depth and power of my voice and what I could do with it and how I could affect change with my voice, both like vibrationally in my body and in the room, but then also with speaking up for myself. And that, you know, translates everywhere. That's in the room with the musician saying, hey, like that's actually not quite right. Let's try it this other way, which is something that I was not able to do with Shades, which is why I made it all myself, is because I didn't feel empowered enough to say, hey, I want this bass line to be played this way or whatever. And then also just working in the world, moving through the world from a sense of groundedness and centeredness and power.
With that in mind then, what are live performances like for you? Because you mentioned earlier kind of the emotional aspect of it, if you're really into a song, that shines through in the performance. And then what you mentioned now, what are life experience for you? How do you kind of, is it very conscious? Is it kind of more like a flow state? How do you?
I think it's a flow state. It has to be. For me, if I get in too much into my brain, my brain is both my greatest asset and my worst enemy. So if I get too much in my mind, I get in my own way. I start thinking about things and I'm sort of unable to sing in the way that I would like to. So it's definitely a flow state. I feel like when I first started, I used to fully leave my body.
Okay.
And now I'm at a place where I can be in my body and rooted and also expand up. I'm much more grounded than I was at the beginning of this process, for sure.
With everything that we've talked about, I always like to talk about the idea of success, and now obviously for you, I don't think some kind of commercial gain is kind of why you do this.
No.
What is it? And we kind of obviously you get a lot of out of this yourself, but what is that idea of success surrounding what you do? Is it purely for yourself, or do you like to get people to go along with that journey?
I think foundationally it's for myself. It has to be, sure. Especially with the kind of music that I make and the place that I've come out of it. It is a tool for me to express myself and to bring myself into the world. That said, if a single person is touched by it and a single person is empowered to step into their emotionality and step into themselves and step into their pain and then even move one click beyond it, learn how to work with it. I mean, that's success to me. Like if I can empower one person to start singing or one person to start radically looking at themselves and bringing themselves out into the world in a new way, like that's awesome. That's it. That's all I can ask for.
So I'm going to end with a very cheesy question then, but what would you tell your younger self then before this whole like last 8 years or something?
Oh, I mean, things just get so much better.
I think that's a good thing to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I would say believe in miracles. We are miracles, and miracles are all around us all the time. Dude, look at this camera. It's a miracle. What are we, like, never forget. Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful way to end.
Yeah, beautiful.
Vera, may I thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much.